Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us in this tutorial where we will share with you how we created this bedroom, and that include the modeling part with the cloth simulation, and also how we created the curtain, animate them and export them to Unreal Engine, and how we created these widgets to control the curtain inside Unreal Engine. So let's get started. So if you have been following our tutorials along the way for the project that we have chosen, which is one of the NG Architects villas, you'll see that once we have finished the exterior and some ground floor elements such as the dining, sofa, living, and also the kitchen, in this part we will focus on the master bedroom part. And the idea here is that we want to develop the master bedroom from scratch using some photo reference images that will help us achieve our design. So a question may arise, why don't we just download a free model of a bed and then continue from there? And that's also true. You can go to 3D Sky, free, type bed, and you'll get a lots of nice and well-developed model that can be used. But the problem is, some of these models, for example, might not all fit. For example, if you have a picky clients that require a specific design, then your job will be combining, after downloading a bunch of them, combining some of the elements together so you can at least match what he's requesting. Let's say, for example, your client is asking for a back bed that looks similar to this design, and along with other specific elements such as the blanket and the cover sheet, and also he wants a chair inside the room. Let's say, for example, this one that we picked from Menotti. And it's always a good idea to have the knowledge to develop such models from scratch, so it can help you to modify or apply these elements in your design without wasting more time on adjusting something that have been already done. So this is our target now, is to develop the achieved bed that you have seen in our teaser video. So let's add a simple plane, and this is gonna be a size of a 2 meter. Go into edit mode and then insert inward, typing 0.05. Separate the middle part as this is the mattress, and then choose the other part as well and separate them. Back bed is fine, no problem, we can keep it as it is, but for these elements we need to align the vertex to be straightforward, as our example is basically include this feature, which is this one. We want to develop the same base that we can see here. So making sure that we have snap is on vertex, we're gonna drag this on the x-axis and try to make it straight and choose this edge. For example, type it. If we look again on the F reference images, the other way around. So choosing this, and the rest will be done the same way. So let's select these 3 bays and select all in edit mode, extrude by 20 centimeters. Let's work on this one first and select this face, insert by, let's say, for example, 0.004, because we want to achieve this kind of gap at the end. We want to extrude this also as well to the same value, 0.004. And now we want to apply a subdivision modifier. But before that, we need to add more subdivision on some part of this shape. So after applying a subdivision modifier, let's just add first a few edges at the end of the shape, so we can get a cleaner, smoother edge. So once this is done, let's also apply the cloth modifier so we can inflate the outer part of that base. And to achieve that, as we have seen in our previous tutorials, we need first to define which part of this object will not be affected by the cloth modifier. So I'm gonna choose these elements. Let's apply here another segments here. So here, and if we choose this, for example, and by hitting Control plus, we can now choose this as our vertex group and call this none clothes, for example. Assign, and when we apply the cloth physics properties on top of the object, we now need to adjust our properties so we can have the same effect as we can see here. And inside the cloth properties, we're gonna set the pressure to 2, because basically we wanna have an inflation happening inside, and to make sure also that inside the shape we don't wanna affect the vertex group that we have set up. And the occlusion, we'll set the distance to the minimum, so put this 00 to set it to the minimum, and we're gonna have a collision happening with these 3 all together. So I'm gonna hit also the self collision, the distance will be also hit 00, and lastly the field weight, make sure that put the gravity to 0, because we don't want the object to fall down, and keep it just in its place and have the simulation done while it's standing. So I'm gonna apply the same to the other 3, but before that also we need to do another step, is to unwrap this by selecting this element and mark seam, and then unwrap it as we did in our previous tutorial. Just select all the faces and hit unwrap. So we need to unwrap this, but as you can see we have another side that we didn't do. That's fine for now, but if you want to adjust also the other side, it's up to you. Inside the UV editing, if we select all the faces, unwrap with our seam, mark seam chosen, press on L and select this, and we can see that we have a non-straight element. So, and we can fix this easily by going to edge mode, right select, auto align, do the same thing for this specific face. This is something we did in our previous tutorial as well. I'm gonna select this as my main, and then hit L to select the remaining of this faces, and then follow active quads, and we have successfully straightened our faces. So we'll do the same thing with the other 2, and then hit the simulation. So now if we hit simulate, we can see now all 3 of them have been inflated, and we can actually see that this is something similar to what we want. Of course, you can minimize the inflation rate and adjust that based on your preference. Now let's have also the mattress. So I already have here a mattress that was originally a rectangular, extruded, and have the edges chamfered as well. If we go to the modifier and disable the subdivision, and something worth mentioning also, you can see that we are arranging the cloth on top of the subdivisions. Basically, the subdivision is smoothing the object after the cloth have been applied. This is different from subdividing, then having the cloth simulation happening, as this will take more time. This can be applied differently based on your cloth simulation type. So right here, we also added more vertex on some areas, as you can see, by subdividing this, because the main idea of the cloth simulation is having these vertex weight affecting specific areas. And in our example here, if you can look on the image reference, we have a few wrinkles that can be achieved by sculpting, but can also be achieved during the Cyclo simulation. This can be easily done by going to the shape after also selecting the simulated vertex group, which in this case it's the one in the top. We want to only inflate the side of the matrix. So inside the clothes modifier, inside the shape, we have added a shrinking factor to -0.1. If we keep this as 0 and hit simulate, and let's disable the wireframe, you can see that we don't have anything happening except a few wrinkles on the side because of the number of the vertex. But if we keep this as it is, -0.01 at this value, you can try multiple values as well, and then simulate. We'll see that we start to have a few wrinkles, and if we activate also the subdivision, we'll see something interesting happening on top of that. So this is basically just a simple matrix that could look as a one with a cover sheet wrapping it all around. Now let's do the blanket part. So if you're okay with the result, it's a good time now to apply the modifiers, but make sure first that you have unwrapped your object before applying the subdivision. So if we apply our modifiers, make sure to start with the cloth, then the subdivision. Alright, now it's time to create this blanket along with this. Now we'll start by adding the 3D cursor on this area, for example, and add the single vertex. Make sure you're on the vertex selection. Extrude it on the x-axis. Now our blanket is fold, so we're gonna extrude it like that. Create the same shape. And now if we move this top view, we'll apply a thickness to this object by adding a solidify modifier on a thickness of 2, for example. And then we will add the cloth properties. Make sure you're on frame 0 or 1, and apply a subdivision surface to that as well. I'm gonna keep the solidify under all of them just to see how the result is coming up, and add edges at the end as we did with the bed base. Now we'll add also the other sheet on top of that. The way you can see this sheet have been folded on top of the bed is basically a type of simulation that can be applied if we create the shape like that, for example. You can try different technique as you wish. This is something that we have tried before. Make it a little bit longer than the bed cover on the y-axis. Okay. Now the trick here is that this one have some extra shape on top of that, so I'm gonna subdivide. And same thing here. Now if we want to create this single shapes at the end of the blanket, we can basically select the whole edge by pressing Alt and left click, and then go to select, checker deselect, and based on the edge you can change your offset if it's on the other side, if you want to keep the last edge unselected. At this moment we can extrude it, and then we need to add edges as well to all of these shapes. Now we cannot go one by one, but because this is going to make it more slower process, but we can do this quickly by going to the edge and subdivide the edge ring, and that's basically it. Apply also a solidify and a cloth modify. Now, it is really important to mention here something regarding adding layers of objects that will have close simulation inside Blender or any other software. This blanket have a solidify applied to it, but it doesn't mean that it have a full vertex close simulation. So if we now apply the same modifiers to this one, so now if simulate at this part, we just need to add a collision to all of them and make sure that their collision settings are set to. Same goes for here. We want to add also a collision after we have applied our cloth modifier so they can collide all together. So now if we simulate, so I stopped the simulation at this stage to show you that when we have two objects layering on top of each other to achieve a close simulation, the bottom part should have the solidify applied to it. So the upper object can read all the vertex and have the simulation affected at the end. So we will apply the solidify and then come back and do the simulation again. So at this last stage of our modeling process, let's disable the wireframe again. The blanket, the first blanket object, we have added a cloth properties of 0.2 weight to the vertex, and we minimize the stiffness as much as possible because we want this to bend around the object freely and create more wrinkles and details. Applied a bit of a pressure to inflate it because it has a thickness inside, and along with the collision as at its minimum amount, we have added also a quality of 10, and we kept the gravity for both of them as it is. And the upper part, we didn't add any pressure to it and kept the vertex on a lesser amount because we wanted to move slower a little bit until they simulate together. So if we hit play and look at the simulation now, we can see now that we have almost achieved what we are looking for. Now, sorry about that, collision was not applied to this part, but let's look at what we were trying to do. We were trying to achieve this one, this cover with this blanket, similar to that a little bit, and this is what we have right now. So again, after applying the seam, edge, and unwrap the object, we are ready to apply the modifiers. And maybe for this one, we can also add a shade smooth. Now we can go inside our sculpting brush and add a bit of details on top of them. Now let's move to the back of the bed that we want to achieve, which is this one. Now for the bed back, our reference image is this one. And this is just a simple shape that we have created, simple line extruded. That's it. Now let's subdivide it. On a vertical base, let's put, for example, 13, and horizontally less than that, let's put it to 8, for example, because we want the details here to be longer. Now, I'm gonna subdivide the end of the edge as well, because I don't want this to be chamfered at the edges after we apply a subdivision modifier. Now, let's select the inner vertex. Select, checker deselect, and we want to connect only the selected vertex. We can do that by going to vertex, connect vertex pairs. Go to edge selection mode, and now we want to add a manual selection to these edges of each of the top vertex. Next, let's add a bevel to these edges, Control B, and let's say this amount. And then let's select shape inside. We want to select similar shape. So let's go into face edit mode and then select similar by area. Deselect the upper part as we don't need them. And then we want to convert this into a circle. So right click, loop tools. You can find this inside the add-ons. If you don't have it, just search for it and enable it. Right click circle. Then let's scale it up a little bit by choosing individual origins. So we can select each one of them by pressing S. Then I to insert. And then let's get out of the edit mode and then add a subdivision modifier, apply it, add a shade smooth, go into the sculpt mode, and then go to the face, set face from edit mode selection, and then it will choose recently active selection. Go to one of them, hit Control W, just to increase the selection a little bit. And then we'll go to the mask, box mask, then select the outer edge as we don't want them to be affected. Now we'll go to the brush or the cloth filter inside the tool, inflate, and make sure you select use face set. Then we're gonna go inside and then drag from here just a little bit to the left and add another drag by a little amount, another more, and another more. The smaller drag you are doing, the more details you're gonna get. So this is roughly coming up okay as far as I think, just for this area, maybe because the segments was too much. But the more you're gonna add, it will give you more details. Now let's get out of the sculpt mode and also add a subdivision surface for that. And now we can unwrap this, and then we can add just this final object, which is the sphere on top of each part of that. Unwrap it, and then we'll be ready to finish this part. For the pillow, we have created a simple box shape and extruded the edge of that box. Just a simple face, no thickness or anything. And then in the modifier panel, we applied collision and subdivision with cloth properties physics on. The main idea here is that we added the subdivision after the cloth. So this is what we were referring to. We want to simulate this object after it have been subdivided. Now for the cloth properties of them, they all are the same actually, just different sizes. So we put a very lightweight 0.09 and increased the air velocity, made the blending model to be linear, the stiffness and the damping. Just we played around with some values, and this is what this is what gave us the best result. The pressure was 18 because we want the object to inflate along with a little bit of a shrinking factor, 0.063 on the negative side. No vertex rope, everything is simulated with collision on and a gravity. So if we simulate this now, so you can see during the simulation we're getting a bit of a good result. It's a bit slower than the other simulation because, as we have mentioned, we've added the cloth simulation after the object have been subdivided. The reason behind this is that we want as many vertices as we can to be simulated to give us these wrinkles around the edges and having these objects simulated with a high quality. Of course, there is also a collision happening when they interact with the blanket and the mattress. We added a simple bed bag just to have a simple collision. So if we stop it at this stage, you can start to see that we have a pretty good result. And once you're okay with that, once you reach to the desired stage, you'll apply an unwrap before applying the subdivision, and then do the same thing with the straight knit using the auto align as we did before. So this is basically just the simple, and the rest of the remaining element of the master bedroom have been done with using the simple, straightforward methods, nothing complicated. The rug, however, was done using the same method we did also with the sofa tutorial. If you have missed this, we'll add it also in the description below. Now for the chair, there was a little bit of a trick modeling this chair. Let's see how we did that. We've collected some reference images from Menotti website. We'll share the link in the description. And the main image was the blueprint of that chair. So inside Blender, we've added two planes and arranged them together based on the scale. You just add a single vertex on one of the clear dimension point, let's say this one, and scale based on an origin aligned to this area using the 3D cursor, and then scale it as we done before in our previous tutorials. Then on a top view, we've drawn the base of the chair. Hypothetically, it may be different a little bit, but it will create the shape that we're looking for. And from the front view, we've created also this shape, which is representing the side of the chair. But how can we create the whole object topology? Well, the first thing we did is to extrude the shape or the base of the chair. So moving this along this side, rotate it by minus 90 degree, then select all the edges, extrude it, bring them down a little bit. And then from the front view, we will use a knife projection tool. And this is very helpful inside Blender to develop or model a lots of similar objects. Now, let's first make sure that we align our side shape horizontally, like that. Move it a little bit, but keep just a small amount of vertex coming outside the shape. Now in the front mode, let's also subdivide this as many as we can. So we want to get as much vertex as we can, and then select this, then control, select the chair. If we cannot select it, just make sure which one is it in the outliner. Select all, then press Control and select the chair, mesh, knife project, make sure it's cut through, and then we're gonna hit P to separate it. Now we have the basic shape of the chair based on the base of that chair and the side projected shape. The first thing we're gonna need to do is remove all the unconnected vertex. We can do that by selecting one of the vertex, select similar, and the amount of connected edges. It will select all the similar edges, just remove the bottom part which represent the basic shape of the chair. Right click and dissolve. Now we can also connect these vertex by selecting these two. For example, press J, same here. And if we now add a subdivision modifier, we'll get a simpler with a solidify shape. It will give us a thickness to that, and start editing your chair from that point. Then the final result will, after editing this, all of the other element, we basically also took a copy of the inner faces and selected all the vertex around this shape and made them as a selection group or a vertex group to be isolated from the cloth simulation, added the cloth simulation to this part and simulated. And with this, we have finished our part 1 of this tutorial. And in part 2, we will continue with the curtain modeling, animate them, and exporting the whole thing to Unreal Engine. So thank you very much and see you in the next video.